Welcome, I'm Tom DeCord here in Medellin with Douglas Kiang. And Douglas is a longtime classroom educator. He has a background in English, but has taught primarily coding and computer science. And we've known each other for about 2 decades because we both taught at an independent school outside of Boston. So Doug, welcome. And did you ever think we'd be doing a podcast in Colombia?
Never in a million years, Tom, but I'm certainly happy to be here and happy to be on the podcast, and it's great to see you again.
It's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming to visit. I'm thrilled to have Doug here, many different levels, a great friend, but also one of the most talented, thoughtful educators I've ever known. He not only does he bring impeccable credentials as a classroom teacher in multiple schools across the country, but he's a recognized thought leader in education technology. He's a keynoter on AI in education, multiple countries actually, in Singapore, Latvia, Indonesia is coming up soon, and more. So I always learn from him, and it's just wonderful to have this opportunity to chat. So Douglas has a popular column on LinkedIn, and recently he wrote about how he was teaching his students how to evade AI detectors, and I just got to ask, what were you thinking?
It seems crazy, right? We spend so much of our time, I think, trying to find ways to detect kids who are cheating using AI, and the big question these days is always, well, did the child actually write this, or was this written by a computer? And I think that in the future, it's going to matter a lot less who wrote something. It's going to be much more what's the quality of what's written, and to what extent does this essay represent my own thoughts and beliefs, and can I stand up and defend the thoughts that are in this essay, regardless of how the actual words got there. And so when I talked to my students, this was a group of seniors. They were just a few months away from graduating. And I said, the reality of it is in college, everybody's going to be using AI, like all the time, for everything. Whether the college says it's okay or not. Some colleges are going to say you can't use AI at all, and the students are going to do everything they can to camouflage their writing to make sure that it doesn't sound like AI writing, but they're still going to use it. And I told my kids, those are actually useful skills. We should probably all be doing that, going through and really not just putting in a prompt and copying and pasting the result, but going through and scrutinizing it and saying, does this sound like me, or does this sound like a computer, and making changes to it. And so I taught my students a process of figuring out by writing on their own, what does your own human voice, what's your writing voice sound like? What are the things that you like to say? What are the kinds of things that show somebody that this writing came from you? And then create a skill or a document that articulates all of those things that make you you. I also asked them to generate AI text and look at the difference between the AI generated text and their text and say, these are all the things that AI does that I would never do. Things like using em dashes, or not X but Y, or using triplets. And so they wrote a separate skill to say, if you see this, don't do any of these things. And then when they prompt AI to generate text in their voice, it follows the do's, and then it goes through and scrubs out the do nots. And I think that those are really useful skills that we need to learn how to apply in order to use AI to kind of help with articulating our thoughts more clearly.
So you've taught English literature, you were an English major, and you write a lot about writing. And you've thrown this concept of writing as directing. Could you elaborate on that, explain what you mean by that?
Sure. So I was doing some research, and there's a concept called distant writing. And distant writing is the idea that rather than doing what we've always traditionally taught is close writing, paying attention to every word in a sentence, close writing mechanics, being very careful about wording specifically. Distant writing is at a level above that, where we're directing the AI or a machine to do the writing, but we're coming up with the thesis, with the main points, with the overall structure, and then we're sometimes directing a number of different AIs to write a draft and then reading closely to compare the drafts. If you think about it, we have the Academy Awards, and every year we give the Best Director Award. But the Best Director wasn't necessarily the person who was behind the camera in that movie. The Best Director is someone who has a vision and is able to direct the film crews to maybe shoot multiple versions of a scene and then compare them and say, well, this is close to my vision, this is not. And if they do a good job assembling all of those, you have a great movie. If they do a lousy job, it's a lousy movie, regardless of how good the individual shots are. And so, you know, the best directors are people who have a sense of taste and a sense of judgment. And I think those skills are what we need to be teaching kids. How do you read carefully and discern which is a better version of what my ultimate vision is from another one? And I guess the key is, the thing about distant writing is it requires close reading and close writing. You can't do one without the other. So, you know, the best directors were often, they came up through the ranks, often the best directors were behind a camera back in the day. So they know what a good shot looks like because they've had to frame that shot up themselves. So what I'm saying to teachers is, this is not, with AI, it's not that we don't teach or can't teach close reading and writing anymore. In fact, those skills are even more important now, because I think what's going to be happening is kids are going to be expected to be able to direct teams of AI agents to do the writing, if they're working in marketing or something like that, and they will need to be able to read closely to very quickly determine which is better and which is worse.
Because I think some would push back and say, well, look, we learn through the process of writing, and this sounds like we're almost observing or supervising, and you seem to be arguing that in order to direct the writing, that we need to understand writing, and we have to be proficient in the writing process and very active in the writing process. Am I framing it accurately?
You are. And we've traditionally thought of teaching writing as a lifetime process, that becoming a good writer is something that you can work your entire life at to become better and better as a writer. I think what's happening now with AI is there's another horizon beyond that, which is the ability to be a director. My daughter's boyfriend is a software engineer in Manhattan, and his workload in his job has tripled because people have been laid off, and he's now expected to use AI in his job. And so much more of his job is supervising teams of agents that are coding, that are basically writing all of the code. And he has a degree in computer science, so he knows what good code looks like. But he is beyond the point where he himself needs to be generating all of that code. Right. He would prefer to write the code himself, but the reality of it is the work product, the expectations for how much he's producing have tripled. And I think that that's probably going to spread to other disciplines as well.
So in your writing on LinkedIn, in your keynotes, in your various presentations, you spin some wonderful stories that try to convey fundamental messages or themes when it comes to the incorporation of AI in education. And one of those is around accuracy, that accuracy breeds complacency. What do you mean by that? What's the message that you're trying to convey?
Well, the message behind accuracy breeds complacency is the problem is not that the AI sometimes gets things wrong. The problem is that AI is right so much of the time. And in fact, it's right so much of the time that we often stop looking, we stop checking. One example that I think about is whenever I go to a restaurant and I pay the bill, now they've started to put the tip. They have a little tip calculator that shows you exactly what an 18% tip, a 20% tip, a 22% tip looks like. And so, you know, I've gotten in the habit now of just looking at it and putting it in. Is it correct? I don't know. I used to be able to do the tip in my head. I still could if I applied myself, but I have students who could not do the tip in their head. They're completely dependent on that tip calculator. And some restaurants in my area, they don't even have the 18%. They start at 20%, they go to 22%, 25%. And if you don't know how to do the math in your head, you have no choice. You have to be 20% at the minimum. So, accuracy breeds complacency. We're getting so used to things that the machines are doing for us that we forget the importance of also building in those skills underneath it.
There's another concept that you convey is fascinating, the unseen seen. Can you explain that?
Sure. So again, and it has to do with, we've spent so much time focusing on what are the things that AI is going to get wrong and where is it going to hallucinate? Well, the fact of it is nowadays AI is pretty good and it gets a lot of things right. But the problem is we don't see the things that AI doesn't give us. So for example, I was in a committee recently where we had given a survey to all faculty and we had hundreds of responses. We took all of the responses and we fed them into an AI and we said, what do teachers say is special about our school? And AI generated a list of 5 or 10 things and we looked at them and it was a good list. And it said the things that make us special, a block schedule, small class size, college counseling. And, we looked at it and we said, yeah, that's us. Let's move on. But one of the teachers in the room said, well, hold on a second. What about what it didn't tell us? How do we know that those are the things that are really what make us special? Because we don't know why it came up with that list. Is that because those are truly the things that most people said? Or is it because those are the things that most people say about their schools, that those are the things that make them special? What about that nugget that might be buried on page 11 that some teacher was really impassioned about and said, this is why I like to teach at this school? We don't see that because it was never given to us. And so I think the bigger danger with AI is this idea of the unseen. To get around this with my students, I always have them brainstorm before they open up their computers and go to AI, and have them brainstorm 5 different ideas for how this piece of writing might start. And then they ask AI. And maybe they compare them and they go with something that the AI gave, and that's fine. But a lot of the time it's that idea that came to them at the dinner table, or that's something that they feel really passionately about. They're going to go with that one instead of the AI, but that's the unseen. It wouldn't be there if they hadn't brainstormed before they asked AI the question.
And another concept here is building on the ABCs, and not what most people would think of when you say, let's focus on the ABCs. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so one thing that I've been focusing on teaching all freshmen in our AI literacy course. So we teach a course to all freshmen about AI literacy and AI fluency. And one of the concepts that we teach them is ABC, which is always build context. So some kids will start up a chat and they'll just ask questions in the chat, and then they'll close their computer, they'll open it up, and then they'll go and they'll ask something else, like some other random unconnected idea. And so they'll put all of these different ideas into one chat, but a thread has context in it. And so one of the things we teach them is open a new thread every time you're changing the subject. So for every new subject, you should have a new thread. And what they should do is use the search and go back to that thread if they have a follow-up question about the same thing. So now, and I show them right now, I have all my chats, anytime I'm asking questions about cooking, for example, I have a thread that I'm using about cooking, and I go back to that same thread, and it knows what kinds of appliances I have in my kitchen. It already knows it knows a lot of context that ordinarily I would have to keep retelling it. And then the other thing that we show kids is how to use projects so that they can take all of the documents that are related and put them in there as context. And that just makes the quality of the AI responses so much better. The other thing that kids have been using at our school is Notebook LM through Google, and kids will use that to study for tests, to give themselves quiz questions. And the power of Notebook LM is it forces kids to generate sources and find sources and start curating and pulling together slideshows or study notes, and they put them all in one place, and then it mostly uses those sources as the source for its responses. And so that's one of the things we're really trying to teach kids is ABC, always build context.
Well, let's build on this because you're talking about the AI literacy course that you teach in the 9th grade. And of course, there's so many different definitions of AI literacy and so many different approaches to it. So can you elaborate on your approach and how you draw a distinction between AI literacy and AI fluency? What does that mean to you?
Sure. So AI literacy is really understanding AI's role in society and how it affects everything that we do. It's understanding where it makes sense to use AI and where it maybe doesn't make sense to use AI. Where is the role of the human in terms of creating content? Also issues of bias. A lot of these AIs were trained on biased sets, and so the answers that they give are biased, and they reflect a very human bias, even though it's still AI. So understanding AI critically about when to use and when not to, that's what we think of as AI literacy at our school. AI fluency is understanding how to prompt, understanding how to use agents, understanding how to work with AI and how to get things done. That's AI fluency, and I think you need both of them. Now, we actually surveyed all of our teachers, and then when I teach freshmen, I give freshmen largely the same survey looking at the different ways that they use AI, and what we've found is that our teachers, by and large, are very high on the AI literacy side of things. Teachers are very thoughtful about how they use AI and when to use it and when not to use it, and they really understand this. But many teachers don't use AI nearly as much, and so they're fairly low on AI fluency. With our students, it's entirely the opposite. The vast majority of our students use AI every day for all kinds of things, but they don't really think about why they're using it or how to use it. For them, it's just another app on their phone. So they really don't have that overall perspective. And so our goal for the faculty is to raise their AI fluency by giving them more practice creating with AI and using AI, but also to work with the students to raise their AI literacy so that they understand the importance of building foundational skills and understanding that sometimes you don't want to use AI.
So let's get in the weeds a little bit about the strategies, activities, projects that you embark upon with your students to build these exact skills.
Well, I'm a computer science teacher, and so I think part of AI is understanding how it works. That's very important. And so I start kids out with an experiment. I have them write this prompt. I have them go into any AI they want, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and I have them say, write a 150-word scene between a named ER doctor and an ER nurse. And then let's just see what they come up with. And this is a great activity to do on your own as well. And I will bet dollars to donuts, somebody out there has a doctor named Marcus Chen.
Right,
that comes up all the time. Or there's also, I think there's Tomas Perez.
Mm-hmm.
And kids, and I'll say, well, how many people here has a doctor named Maya Chen? And people, or Maya Patel, and people will raise their hand and the kids are shocked. Sometimes half the class has a doctor with the exact same name, even on a different AI. And the reason for that is because the way that AI works is it always chooses the most predictable next token. So the next word, they tend to choose the same things, especially with a very simple prompt like that. And so we then go to images and we say, create an image. If we just say, create an Asian male image, you tend to get the same guy. I don't know who this guy is. He doesn't look like me, but time and again, you get somebody who largely looks the same. And again, it's because models tend to collapse toward the mean. Mm-hmm. They look at what the average is, what the mean is, and they sort of tend to go towards that. The antidote for this is to create larger, more detailed prompts. And this is the reason why, if we give an assignment to kids, like an essay, and the kids basically just copy and paste the same prompt into the chatbot, it's why on our end as teachers, we'll get 10 or 15 essays that sound largely the same because it's collapsed towards the mean. So again, another thing that we try to teach kids is you have to know something more about your subject if you're going to come up with something that doesn't look like it was generated from an AI.
Reminds me too, if you're an English teacher and you're exploring lesson ideas, invariably they're centered around Catcher on the Rye. They keep bringing up the same handful of classical pieces of literature that you're coming up again and again and again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in our English literature class, we studied a book called Clara and the Sun, which is a great book because it's actually written from the perspective of a robot, of an AI, who's trying to fit into the human world. And we actually found many more uses of AI, not as a writing partner, but in fact more as a way to get feedback. And so we would have kids write their own draft by hand, but AI is really useful at saying, well, have you considered some of these alternate approaches? And kids need to know to prompt it, don't do the writing for me. Just help me think about how to make this better, how to make this essay stronger. And we actually found, and the kids actually preferred using AI as a secondary opinion in addition to working with their classmates, working with us, the teachers, and then working with AI. So I think if you are honest and upfront right off the bat, and we told them, you're not going to get in trouble if you're using AI. We just want you to be able to explain how you used it and why you used it and how it made your writing better. And that completely changed the discourse in the classroom, because now it wasn't this secrecy thing where kids are afraid they're going to get in trouble. They were remarkably forthcoming about what they tried in the classroom with AI, where it was helpful and where it wasn't. And I think elevating that dialogue just really helped us overall with this whole question of how do we use this incredible new tool.
So some viewers may be listening to this and getting the impression that yours is an AI-saturated class, that it drives pedagogy, it drives activities. But I know that pen and paper, and in fact even colored pencils, are very much a part of your pedagogical strategies. Can you explain to us how you blend both AI and non-AI in pedagogy and instructional strategies?
Yes, well, one of the things that we realized a couple of years ago is everybody's using AI all the time. That makes it a little hard if you teach an intro computer science course like I do, because it's hard to tell whether kids are using AI to do the homework or not. And so what we've ended up doing is we've radically changed the grading scheme. So we used to mostly grade the take-home projects. Now we grade those more on a pass-fail, like you either did it or you didn't. But when kids come into class, and actually this system we used to use anyway, because kids could get help from all kinds of places on the homework. Not just before AI, they were talking to their parents or talking to previous students, things like that. So when they come into my classroom, I have a number of worksheets basically with problems on them that are things that we've either talked about previously or that we're going to talk about in class. And everybody has a pencil, and they use the pencil to fill out their best guess, their best attempt in pencil. And I tell them, if you don't know, just guess, and then write it down, and then we go over it as a class. And we have blue pens, and the kids use the blue pens to make corrections. So if they've written down something that's incorrect, they're expected to cross it out, write the correct answer in blue pen. And I tell them, this doesn't count. It doesn't count at all. But I do use it when I go through kids' folders and I look at their work. If kids are largely not able to do the things that the worksheet is asking them to do, but I know they're also turning in perfect homework every night, there's a mismatch there that needs to be interrogated in some way. We also try to teach kids that it's okay to fail. It's okay to guess and get it wrong as long as you're writing in the correct answer. And our goal over time is to have less blue pen and more pencil, because they knew more of it the right time. We've also, we've had to increase the number of quizzes, because I think that's also a teachable moment. And I don't think it's feasible for me to tell them, if you use AI, I will catch you. I'll tell them, if you use AI, that's your choice. I may or may not catch you. But if you use AI too much, you won't be able to do the daily checks, and you're going to bomb the final exam. And the final exam ultimately is what counts a lot more. This is not the way that I would have wanted my class to be. I wanted it to be much more project-based, but I've had to, with the advent of AI, move more towards paper assessments.
I see. Now, you have a book that's coming up, right? I know the publisher is waiting for basically the final copy before you go to print. I'm not sure how much you can divulge, but can you perhaps basically encapsulate your main message, and what are the principal themes that you're trying to address in your book?
Sure. So the book is called Hands on the Wheel, a human-centered guide to AI in the classroom. And it kind of started with this lighthearted AI policy that I had in my classroom. I basically said, if you want to know what my policy towards AI in my classroom is, it's basically don't let the pigeon drive the bus. And this is this picture book where the pigeon is constantly saying, can I drive? Can I drive? Let me drive. But you have to hold back and not let the pigeon get behind the wheel, because none of us wants to live in a world where the pigeons are just driving the bus all the time. And so with AI, it's very similar. Kids are constantly being prompted in Google, can I help you with this? Can I help rewrite this? Can I make this better? They're constantly being told their own writing is not good enough and that AI should rewrite it. And I tell them, you need to know where you're going. You need to have a plan, and AI can help you, but you don't ever want to let the AI drive. And so the book is really a series of strategies about how to do this in your classroom. What does it look like in your classroom to have what we call an AI forward classroom, where instead of saying these are all the places where you can't use AI, we think about where are all the places where we could use AI, and we try to use it as much as possible, except for the places where it would hurt our own learning. And so we have kids keep a metacognitive journal where they think about not just the content of what they're learning, but also how they're learning it and how effective the different strategies they're using to learn it are. And in some cases, kids are finding that, I decided not to use AI at all, and that actually was detrimental to my learning because I wasn't using a lot of these tools like Notebook LM and other things that were available.
Terrific. Now we're coming near the end of the podcast, and I can hear our dog Rosita clamoring for she's whimpering, clamoring for some attention. I'm going to have to take care of her in a few minutes. But what I was hoping is that you might give a sense of where do you think we're headed as far as classroom applications of AI. And what would be your advice to those teachers who are healthy skeptics? They're listening to you and they're intrigued, but they're also nervous and want to approach and proceed cautiously. What would you say to them?
I would say the kids need us now more than ever, because we are the ones that are thinking critically about how AI can be used, should be used. We, unlike the kids, have seen a world that has developed without the use of AI, and that gives us a lot of knowledge. And there are a lot of concerns about AI. There are environmental concerns about AI. There's concerns about data and how it's collected. There are lots of reasons to conscientiously object to using AI. But I think if we do that, just to be perfectly honest, I think we abdicate some of our responsibility, and we leave our kids to their own devices to figure things out at a time when they actually need adult supervision more than anything else. I think it's incumbent upon us to use AI in ways that make sense to us, but at least become familiar with it. As teachers, we really are the experts in how kids learn, and we're the ones that are going to guide them to be responsible, ethical members of society. AI is not going away. So in order to make sense of it, I think kids need our guidance more than ever.
Thank you so much, Doug. Now, I've had the pleasure of reading an advanced copy of your book. Tell us, when do you expect it to come out so we're keeping our eyes open for it?
The book will be out in September.
It's wonderfully thoughtful and some wonderful anecdotes of story that really convey fundamentally needed messages around the incorporation of AI in education. Doug, I can't say thank you enough for coming all the way from Menlo, from California here, visiting me and my wife It's been a wonderful week. We have had a great time with you here. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience, because you are definitely one of the most thoughtful educators I've ever run across in over 30 years in education. And so I just hope that your message reaches as many educators as possible. So
Thank you so much, Tom. That means a lot to me. I have so much respect for you and for the work that you've done.
Thank you.
So that means a lot to me. Thank you, and it's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.